All right, we're back with Mike Yukonevich, who is a leadership development um, program trainee, I guess, with Crane Worldwide Logistics. He graduated from the University of West Florida just over a year ago, so he was in the introductory courses not too long ago in our logistics of the job. And what exactly, Mike, does Crane Worldwide Logistics move?
Yeah, so we have the potential to move anything. Is what our sales team would say.
Well, you've
We
got
can.
Harley Davidson,
We
you've got
do.
Halliburton with oil equipment, and what
Yeah.
else?
So some of our client list, Delta Airlines, Cummins engines, Harley Davidson, Yeti coolers, and then a lot more. Trust me. Any industry, we pretty much touch it. I mean, pretty much every day I learn something new. Whether it's a perfume kit for Macy's for the holiday seasons, um, or if it's security cameras or Harley Davidsons, um, we can do it, and we do everywhere and anywhere in the world. We can move it from and to, and we do. So I've had a really wild ride in my 6 months at Crane. I got hired on, went to Houston for a couple weeks of orientation, and then they shipped me off to China with two bags and no Mandarin knowledge at all.
But you knew that was coming, right?
I
You knew
did.
that they rotate you through these major facilities in your training, right? Oh,
Absolutely.
okay, so you
So.
said yes originally.
So I did. I moved to China for just under 3 months and had an amazing experience, life changing. While I was there, I had the opportunity to visit a few facilities and ports that we use, including our air and ocean facilities, warehouses, and our agents' warehouses as well, getting to see them move clothes and perfume and engine parts. But then I also got to go take a tour of a couple ports and facilities over there, including a break bulk facility and then also the Yangshan CFS terminal over there, which for the logistics nerds out there is the busiest port in the world for containers. Um, and if you have some free time to look it up, it's very fascinating. It is an island that they built a port on to facilitate to the largest container ships in the world. And these vessels that can hold um, up to like close to like 18,000 containers. I mean, they're massive. They take all day to load. They take multiple cranes, probably 6 to 8 cranes to load, and they can go anywhere in the world. So I did. I got to see that, and that was amazing. It was 180 degrees of containers and cranes and vessels waiting to berth. And then what was also cool is I got to see them finishing up what they call phase four, which in about 6 months to a year will be a completely automated section of the port. There will be no need for people except for behind the computers telling them what to do, but completely automated, picking up containers, loading them onto the vessels, um, completely removing the human out of it. Very fascinating. And then while I was in China, I also got to go down to Hong Kong for a week. Also see their ports, see our facilities there where we do a lot of air consolidating, both receiving it from Asian countries and then sending it all to the US, or vice versa, sending it to the Asian countries. And so, of course, I was doing a lot of business, but there's always time for play. I got to go visit Macau. I got to go gamble in the world's largest casinos over there. Made a little money, had some fun, and then got to go visit Beijing as well, walk on the Great Wall, and learn a little bit about the history of China and the government as well. And then coming back after China, I moved to Chicago, which was everything was an amazing experience so far. But Chicago is great. I learned a lot about ocean consolidating. And there we actually take care of our largest client for Crane Worldwide, which is Cummins Engines. And many people might know them as being the new engine in the Nissan Titans or in Dodge trucks, but what they don't know is Cummins also produces engines for marine vessels, big industrial tractors. During my time there, we probably had 10 or 12 10-foot long engines just sitting waiting for them to order them anywhere around the world to move them. So I got to be a part of that. I got to see all the way from the large engines to vessel engines to nuts and bolts that they were shipping to Brazil or shipping to the UK for repair and maintenance. And then also now that I'm in Atlanta, I do manage a few accounts there, including a surgery or emergency surgery kits for spinal and cardio surgeries, which might sound a little boring and very nonchalant, but I think it's very, very exciting for my day-to-day life because every day I receive phone calls for these kits, and they are due either that night or the very next morning for emergency surgeries. And Dr. Keller and I were discussing about some of the experiences I've had even just managing that one account where, you have your client who's expecting it at 10 o'clock at night for a surgery at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then all of a sudden the airline loses my surgery kit in a facility out in San Francisco. And so then it's how do you recover? How do you fix the situation? How do you overcome and make sure the job gets completed and that the surgery happens on time? Because in most of these cases it's life or death. So not to stress people out or freak people out, but you do keep that in mind, and kind of keeps it exciting when you've constantly got a challenge of I have to get this on time tonight and it has to be there because I know someone is depending on it. And then also another account that I manage is a seafood and meat company that ships every single morning anywhere between 500 and 2,000 pounds of steak and seafood from Atlanta to San Juan, Puerto Rico for all the restaurants and resorts down there. So again, that's another one where if something goes wrong, I know I'm going to get a phone call at 9 o'clock in the morning asking where the meat is or why it hasn't moved, why don't I have an update, and so it's my job to stay on top of those things, make sure that we receive it. Every night we receive the meat about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, and by 2 to 2:30 in the morning it's at Delta's door waiting to be put on a plane. Sitting in a refrigerated unit or a freezer, and then by noon it is in Puerto Rico and it's being distributed to each restaurant. So that's another fun job that I get to oversee. And then also going back to engines is Nissan. So fun factoid for everyone out there is that Nissan has 2 car dealerships in Alaska, but they're also in Anchorage, and then has 8, I think it's 8, in Hawaii. And so anytime those car dealerships need any kind of manufacturing or any factory parts for vehicles, they call me up and I have to arrange transportation out to them, and so people can have their cars fixed. So
Wow. So you go from cars to time-sensitive foods to critically time-sensitive medical supplies and devices. But then the company as a whole distributes domestically Harley Davidson motorcycles and so forth. So, Mike, one of the concepts that we will talk about throughout our logistics courses pertains to third-party logistics providers. And I've heard you say the word, I think, freight forwarder, I've heard 3PL, and then I've heard the term maybe freight brokerage. We try in the classroom to differentiate those academically, but basically Crane Worldwide Logistics does not own the trucks and the trailers necessarily, right? And they don't own the product. So they're this third company in this supply chain that is responsible for the transportation part of that. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so they're trying to. Now, do you have your own warehouses?
We do.
Do you have your own trucking companies?
So,
and that may change depending upon which facility you're in and which clients, right?
So the way it breaks down is Crane Worldwide Logistics does not have any trucks. Crane Freight Services does. It's our sister company. We use them as much as possible, but it's a growing and developing company, so they're not everywhere for us just yet. So a lot of times we do not use their trucks, so we do use other companies, but we do have our own warehouses.
So your company will potentially take possession of the freight to either hold on to it until you have enough freight to create this economies of scale and transport it more cheaply for your customers, or waiting for the time that your customer needs it, or bringing it into your warehouse or cross dock and performing some kind of value-added activity, whether it's packaging it or whether it's kitting it. I think you had mentioned at one point. In fact, I might ask you to tell that story as well, and then you move it on for the customer. Is that about right?
Certainly. Yeah, back in school I was sort of confused on this idea of what a freight forwarder does versus what a third-party logistics provider does. But the way you described it is perfect. So as a freight forwarder, we take possession of it, and depending on the customer and their needs, we can either warehouse it for long term or short term, or some customers will bring us freight in at 6 o'clock in the morning, and by 5 o'clock that night it's gone. So they only need somewhere to store it or cross dock it, as we would say, for a few hours. But a third-party logistics provider, they never actually take possession. So somebody who needs to move something just gives them a call up, says, hey, I've got 3 pallets and I've got 200 pounds worth of cargo, and it needs to go from Pensacola to Atlanta. I need help moving this. And then
So that's more of a third-party brokerage company, right?
Yeah, and
versus a freight forwarder.
Yeah, and that company would find that trucker and move it, versus we have most of the time long-term clients who have signed deals with us, or at least some sort of contract, and we move all of their cargo for them, and we can offer them any kind of service they need, depending if it's actually manipulating their cargo or just receiving it and sending it somewhere else.
So I mentioned kitting, but you had mentioned it in a prior discussion with me. Um, what do you kit for a client? What's an example?
So one of the examples that I got to see was out in China. Was a perfume and lotion company. Um, I don't know it, but I know it's a big name. I've seen it before in JCPenney's or Dillard's, wherever it may be. But they were actually kitting the lotion and the perfume together. And just like you would imagine, on one pallet you had all these lotion bottles, and then on one pallet you had a bunch of perfume bottles. And they put it into a gift packaging of sort, put it together, taped it up, and then put it on a whole nother pallet to pack up and send to the U.S. for the holidays.
This was done in Hong Kong, is that right?
Yeah, actually this is Hong Kong.
So tell us a little bit about why Hong Kong is such a major hub for distribution into Asia as well as out of Asia. What makes Hong Kong special and cost effective?
So Hong Kong is a special exception out of all of Asia. It is considered a part of China, and Hong Kong itself is not a country, but the way because of its history and its heritage and how it was grown up as a separate country from China. China allows it to run under different rules and laws. And so Hong Kong is considered a free port. Therefore, anything that flies in or comes in on a vessel does not pay any duties or taxes, which is very different considering China or the U.S., for example. Anything that comes into the U.S. at some point has duties and taxes applied to it, and is what raises the price for us customers. But in Hong Kong, that doesn't happen. So customers can send those 2 pallets of lotion and perfume, put it together and ship it out, and they never have to pay taxes on that. For those 2 pallets, they only pay taxes on that 1 pallet whenever it goes into the final country, into the U.S. or into China. And then even China, mainland China, offers manufacturing companies and distribution companies tax breaks if they will export, put it in parentheses, export their cargo. And so some companies will even, especially in Shenzhen area, Beijing, Shanghai, they will truckloads of cargo from their facility down to Hong Kong, and as soon as they cross the border, that truck driver will just turn around and come right back, and that's considered exported. And so then they get that tax break, and then they might sell it to the Chinese consumers. So
wow.
It's a very special place, special island for sure.
So Mike, over our 3 videos that we've done here, I've heard many different aspects of logistics and supply chain management that occur. I've heard everything from transportation, with multiple modes of transportation, with owning your own equipment, with being non-asset based and managing the information and the client's requirements, but also taking perhaps possession of those things and doing some kind of a value-added service. But then I've also heard this element of strategy. It appears to me that by its nature, managing products through the supply chain across multiple supply chain partners requires strategy thinking or strategic thinking. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect of the business? Is that true, or am I just kind of sensing that and maybe it's not? I mean,
Certainly.
Do you feel that your job is about creating strategy and carrying through strategy?
Absolutely. In my daily operations, managing my accounts in Atlanta, with my surgery kits is figuring out, knowing the better locations, knowing what airports might stay open longer, or what airports are not going to lose my cargo, or whatever it may be. But you have to, you look at your destination, and this is very small. I mean, I just manage domestic cargo, but I have to look at my destination and how am I going to get it there? Is there an ice storm coming through? Are they going to shut down the interstate so I can't drive it there 5 hours from the nearest major airport? Do I need to fly it into their small regional airport, and then have it driven 10 minutes down the road? So you do that's a big key in our business, is how do you be different and effective? Anyone can give you a different idea, a different path on how to get your product around the world, but how do you do it and actually fulfill your promises? So people might ask how Crane is so good at what we do, and how we've grown so fast. We're a very young company. We're only 8 years old, and we're pushing $1 billion in revenue, which is pretty unheard of for what we do and how fast we've grown. But we are so successful because we find those ways, we find the strategic path around the world for any type of cargo or any type of freight, and then we can actually, we can fulfill our promises, we do. We don't make any promises we can't keep. And it might sound simple, but I'm learning it is a very common thing in the industry not to do that. So if you're able to think quick on your feet, figure out ways to make things work, new pathways, something that might not be the direct path, but it'll work because it's going through major ports and very strict laws and very, very compliant processes, then you can do it, and customers just want to know that their product will arrive when you say it's going to arrive. It's a big key in our business.
So it sounds like in your position, and very similar to many logistics and supply chain positions, you have to be part operations, you have to be part sales, you have to be part strategy, you have to be part legal and
Certainly.
service and marketing, because you touch all of those aspects for your client. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's it's kind of hard to define one person's job, because they might say that they're an operator, they're an air operator for this customer, and they're supposed to only be doing the air operations, doing the paperwork and filling out all that, but we're required to know, if some legal form needs to be filled out for a certain country, or I need to define what this piece of widget is by this code, or I need to get a power of attorney from the customer. And then, so that's like the legal standpoint and knowing everything involved. But then, as you said, sales and marketing is a big thing, because one wrong step and your customer could be unhappy and not use you. So at any time, they're using multiple transportation companies, so they have the choice, and with one mess up they can say you're fired and I'm going to my other company. And so even though you're an operator, you do have to have a customer service mindset, sales mindset. You got to know how to push it, and then also when you do your job or exceed expectations, that's when you drive for more business. And even as an operator, even though you're not making commission and no one knows that you're making sales, you are driving sales, because you're going to get 2 more jobs today or tomorrow, and that grows very quickly.
Well, we've been speaking with Mike Yukonevich, who is with Crane Worldwide Logistics and a graduate of our University of West Florida BSBA in Supply Chain Logistics Management. And again, bragging on Mike, our first graduate of UWF's Supply Chain Logistics Management BSBA program. And we thank him for his time. And Mike, as always, is available to give us greater insights in the future if any of you ever need. So thank you, Mike. And this concludes our 3 video series for Dr. Keller's supply chain class.